Have you ever felt truly alone in the wilderness? What if that feeling was wrong? National parks are supposed to be havens, but some visitors have stumbled upon something far more sinister. Prepare yourself, because we're about to uncover true, unsettling stories that happen deep within these remote natural landscapes. Stories that defy explanation and will leave you questioning everything. Mount Rainier National Park in Washington is an icon of the Pacific Northwest. Its snow-capped peak dominates the landscape, drawing thousands of people every year. But this majestic mountain has a sinister reputation. Over the decades, more than 400 people have vanished within its sprawling 236,000 acres, and their cases remain unsolved. While a lot of these can be blamed on the mountain's treacherous terrain and wild weather, others are just plain weird. There's one lesser-known story that gets passed around about a young woman who, one rainy night, stumbled into a campsite looking dazed and completely incoherent. She was with her 2 dogs but seemed totally lost, unable to explain who she was or what happened. The campers tried to help, but before they could get any real answers, she turned and disappeared back into the rain-soaked darkness, her dogs following her. She had left her own campsite completely intact, tent, gear, everything, as if she'd just stepped away for a minute. An extensive search was launched, but not a single trace of the woman or her dogs was ever found. It's as if the forest just absorbed them. This story might be a composite of events or a piece of local lore, as it's not a widely documented case. As it echoes the strangeness of other disappearances at Rainier, this pattern of baffling disappearances isn't just a thing of the past. In the summer of 2020 alone, 3 different men went missing in separate incidents, their cars found abandoned. But with no other clues. There was Vincent Jai, an Indonesian student last seen on camera entering the Van Trump Trail. There was Talal Sabah, whose car was found at the popular Paradise visitor area, and Matthew Bunker, an experienced mountaineer and West Point graduate, vanished while skiing down Liberty Ridge. Bunker's body was eventually located in a crevasse, but the exact cause of his fall is still unknown. What makes these cases so disturbing is the lack of information. These aren't just stories of hikers getting lost. They're stories of timelines that just end. People step off a trail and into oblivion. The official explanation often defaults to the mountain's inherent dangers: avalanches, sudden storms, deadly falls. And while those are very real threats, for many of these cases, the evidence doesn't quite add up. The weather was often clear, the individuals experienced. They leave behind cars, campsites, and all their belongings, erasing themselves from the world but leaving their possessions perfectly preserved. The mountain just stays silent, holding on to the secrets of what really happened on its beautiful but unforgiving slopes. To the horrors of Yosemite National Park is often called a cathedral of nature. Its grand meadows and iconic granite domes like El Capitan and Half Dome are symbols of the American wilderness. But even in a place this beautiful, a kind of evil can find a foothold that feels completely out of place. While the Park Service deals with hundreds of deaths annually across the country, most from accidents like drowning, Yosemite has been the stage for crimes so brutal they seem alien to the peaceful landscape. In 1999, a park ranger working near a campground made a discovery that shattered the park's tranquil image. Along a stream, in a place of serene beauty, was the decapitated body of a park employee named Joa Armstrong. The sheer violence of the act was shocking, but its location, inside the supposed sanctuary of a national park, sent a wave of fear through everyone. The investigation quickly led to a motel handyman named Carrie Stainer, who confessed not only to Armstrong's murder but to the murders of 3 other women near the park earlier that year. Stainer, who became known as the Yosemite serial killer, said he'd had fantasies of killing women for decades. He is now on death row. But Stainer isn't the only source of horror in Yosemite's history. The park has a number of disturbing cold cases that are still unsolved. One of the most unsettling began back in 1983. A family was enjoying a day in Summit Meadow when one of their kids made a grisly discovery. A human hand and forearm, apparently frozen through the winter and only recently thawed. Investigators searched the area but found no other remains. For years, the case went cold. Then, in 1988, a skull was found just across the road from the meadow, but authorities still couldn't identify the victim. It wasn't until decades later, with modern forensic work, that the remains were finally identified as Patricia Hicks, a young woman who had reportedly traveled to Yosemite around 1982 and was never heard from again. The mystery of who she was had been solved, but the question of how she died remains. Was she a victim of the notorious serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, who actually confessed to the crime with details that some investigators believed only the killer could have known? Or was her death connected to a local cult leader she was associated with before she disappeared? The case file is still open, a grim reminder that human evil can find its way into even the most remote and beautiful corners of our world. These incidents force us to face a disturbing truth. The wilderness doesn't just hide natural dangers. Sometimes, the most dangerous predators are the ones who walk on two legs. These stories really speak to the power of the unknown, and how the most beautiful places can hold the deepest mysteries. It's this fascination with the unexplained that draws us to these narratives. And if you're someone who loves getting lost in a good story, whether it's a chilling true crime account or a classic mystery novel, I'd recommend checking out Audible. I've been using Audible for years to listen to audiobooks while I'm researching for these videos or just driving. And their library is incredible. You can find deep dives into historical mysteries, suspenseful thrillers, and detailed accounts of survival and exploration. It's the perfect companion for anyone captivated by great storytelling. If you're interested, you can get a free trial by using the link in the description below. It's a great way to support the channel and dive into your next great listen. Now, let's get back to the unsettling tales our parks have to tell. 3. The Weeping Woman of the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is a place of almost unimaginable scale. Its vast, layered chasms were carved by the Colorado River over millions of years, creating a landscape that is both breathtaking and deeply humbling. For centuries, people have been drawn to its edge, staring into its depths with a mix of awe and fear. And like many places with such a profound presence, it has collected its share of ghost stories. The most enduring of these is the legend of the Weeping Woman. The tale is a local spin on the widespread Hispanic folklore of La Llorona, a vengeful ghost who wanders near water, mourning the children she drowned. In the Grand Canyon version, the story often centers on a woman whose husband and son were killed in a tragic hiking accident. Consumed by grief, she is said to have taken her own life, and now her spirit roams the canyon rims, forever searching for her lost family. Her ghost, often described as a woman in a white dress, is most frequently seen along the Transept Trail on the North Rim. Hikers and even park rangers have reported hearing the distinct, heartbreaking sound of a woman sobbing in the middle of the night, only to find no one there when they go to look. The legend has a lot of variations. Some say La Llorona was betrayed by a lover and, in a fit of rage, drowned her own children in the river, a sin that has cursed her spirit to search for them for all eternity. Those who claim to have seen her say she appears as a figure dressed in black or white, sometimes with a face as pale as the moon, or in more terrifying versions with no face at all, just a skull. So what are people actually hearing? Skeptics might dismiss the sounds as just the wind whistling through the canyons or maybe the call of a badger. But the stories persist. There's an account from a worker at Phantom Ranch, the historic lodge at the bottom of the canyon, who swore she repeatedly heard wailing along Bright Angel Creek. Another story tells of a ranger on the North Rim who spent hours searching for what he was sure was a seriously injured woman, based on the sobbing he heard. But his search turned up nothing. The legend of the Weeping Woman speaks to a deeper truth about these immense landscapes. They become a storage place for human emotion, for our awe, our fear, and our sorrow. Whether it's the echo of a real tragedy or a folktale carried on the wind, the story of the weeping ghost adds a layer of deep sadness to the canyon's majestic beauty, a reminder that some grief is so powerful it can stain the very rock itself. For the boy who vanished into thin air, of all the unsettling stories to come out of our national parks, Few are as heartbreaking or as profoundly strange as the disappearance of Dennis Martin. On Father's Day weekend in June of 1969, the Martin family was on their traditional camping trip in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. 6-year-old Dennis, his older brother, his father, and his grandfather had hiked to Spence Field, a scenic meadow on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. On the afternoon of June 14th, Dennis and the other kids decided to play a harmless prank on the adults. The plan was simple. They'd hide in the bushes on either side of the trail and jump out to surprise them. Dennis, wearing a bright red t-shirt that was easy to see, darted behind one bush while the other boys hid somewhere else. A moment later, the other boys jumped out, laughing. But Dennis didn't. He was gone. His father had seen him go behind that bush just moments before. When 5 minutes passed with no sign of his son, he started to get that tight knot of concern in his stomach. He began calling Dennis's name. There was no answer. What followed was the most extensive search in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Over 1,400 people, including park rangers, local volunteers, and even Green Berets, scoured 56 square miles of rugged, unforgiving terrain. But their efforts were almost immediately ruined. Just hours after Dennis vanished, a massive thunderstorm rolled in, dumping inches of rain that washed away any tracks and turned trails into muddy streams. The searchers found nothing. Not a single scrap of his red shirt. Not a shoe. Not a single trace. It was as if the ground had opened up and swallowed the 6-year-old boy whole. And this is where the story goes from tragic to deeply strange. The weird details, as they've come to be known, are what have cemented this case in the history of high strangeness. The most prominent of these was a report from another family, the Key family, who had been hiking in the area that day. They claimed that shortly after Dennis disappeared, they heard a sickening, terrified scream. A few minutes later, they saw something large and dark moving in the woods. What they could only describe as a rough-looking man hiding in the brush, possibly carrying something red over his shoulder. The FBI at the time largely dismissed their account, partly because the sighting was several miles away from where Dennis was last seen. The search officially ended after 2 weeks. But for the Martin family, it never did. Theories have been swirling for decades. The official explanation remains the most logical. If heartbreaking, that Dennis simply wandered off, got disoriented. If succumbed to the elements, his remains scattered by wildlife. But for many, this just doesn't explain the complete and total lack of evidence. How could a massive search party of 1,400 people find absolutely nothing? His family has always believed he was abducted. Others have ventured into far stranger territory, connecting the case to local legends of feral people living deep within the mountains. Whatever the truth, Dennis Martin walked behind a bush on a sunny afternoon and stepped into a mystery that has endured for over half a century. A chilling testament to how quickly and completely a person can be erased by the wild. From the misty peaks of Mount Rainier to the ancient chasms of the Grand Canyon and the dense forests of the Smokies. These stories are all different, yet they share a common, unsettling thread. They remind us that there's a boundary between our world and a wilderness that is far more powerful and mysterious than we can often understand. These parks are preserved for their beauty, for the sense of peace they give us. But they are also truly wild places, where the normal rules don't always apply, where people can vanish without a trace, where violence can erupt in the most tranquil settings. The cases we've talked about tonight are more than just ghost stories or unsolved files. They are solemn reminders of how fragile our lives are in the face of nature's immense power, and sometimes in the face of human darkness. They remind us that for every marked trail, there are a million acres of secrets. And maybe the most unsettling fact of all is that for some of these mysteries, we will likely never have an answer. The wilderness keeps its secrets well. What do you think is the most plausible explanation for these vanishings? Share